We've already talked about some of the building projects in the Roman Empire. Remember, the famous quote for Emperor Caesar Augustus was, "I found Rome a city of wood and left it a city of marble." Now we're going to talk about some more specific buildings and also how do these building projects create a unified empire. One way that it does is Rome starts building lots and lots of mini Romes, is what I call them. I grew up in a really small town, about 2,000 people. And if you drove through my town, you can almost guess what we had. We had a movie theater, we had churches, we had schools, roller skate rink, just the basic stuff. And if you would take your car and drive through other small towns in America, pretty soon all the small towns will start looking alike, and they all have the same stuff. And that's similar to what you'd find during the Roman Empire. Is 2,000 years ago, you hopped on your chariot and you started riding around through these mini cities, you'd see all the same stuff. You'd see aqueducts, bathhouses, fountains, theaters, mini coliseums, temples, roads, and pretty soon they'd all start looking alike. And you would start to have a sense that it was a unified empire. One way that they did this is Rome was growing so fast that they wanted to Romanize the new territories, or make it look and feel Roman. They also wanted the conquered peoples to act and think like Romans, to create this unified empire. One thing that they'd use to do this is theater. Greek and Roman theater was extremely popular. However, they were different. If you recall, Greek theater was not violent. They never showed violence on stage. If there was violence in the play, you might hear screams or something backstage, and then a narrator would come on and he would explain to you what had happened, and he'd let your mind's eye see it, but you'd never actually see it on stage. Roman theater was a little more violent. They did show violence on stage. I remember sitting in a Western Civilizations class in college, and the teacher was talking about how there was a story that the Romans put on a play, Daedalus and Icarus. And if you remember, Icarus was the boy who had wax wings, and he flew too close to the sun, and the wings melted, and he fell. Well, what my professor told me was that they took a condemned criminal, strapped wings on his back, took a crane, and cranked him high in the air, and then right at the end of the play, they just dropped him to his death. Okay, so Roman theater was a little more violent. If you went to the theater, you might not see a play at all. It might be a poetry recital or someone just telling a story. You might have a speaker there. And again, all of this was to help people understand what it meant to be Roman. Another common structure that you'd see in these mini cities were hippodromes. Now, there was a Circus Maximus in Rome, but then there was also these mini chariot stadiums in the cities throughout the empire. You'd also see mini coliseums as well. The main coliseum is commonly referred to as the greatest feat of Roman engineering. But if you look at this picture of the Colosseum, notice all the arches, and you can tell that it's made of concrete. Without the arch and without concrete, this would have been absolutely impossible to do. One reason why it would be impossible is, yeah, you could use marble if you could find enough and if you could pay for it. It would have been way too expensive. The cost would have been astronomical. They couldn't have done it. The other thing is, if you look at the arch, it allows you to build this really tall building. It allows people to move in and around it with ease. You can see here I like this picture because it's cut. Let me go down to the next slide. You can see that it had barrel vaults, those arched hallways going all the way around the Colosseum, 360 degrees, both on the first level and on the second level. And then look how big these arches are. Take a minute and look at those little teeny people there at the bottom. That gives you a sense of scale of how tall this building really was. This is a massive building. And what's amazing is it could hold 50,000 people. You hear different numbers. Just this morning I was listening to a documentary. They said 80,000 people. We don't really know, but 50,000 is the number that I hear the most. And it could be emptied in 15 to 20 minutes. And that's because of all those arches and barrel vaults. People could move so easily in and out of the Colosseum. It's truly a remarkable building. All these mini cities would also have temples. The one temple that I want to talk about specifically is the Pantheon. Now, we've already talked about the Parthenon, which is another temple, right? So we can just assume that theon means temple or god, correct? Well, what does pan mean? Why is it called the Pantheon? The prefix pan means all. So Pantheon means a temple to all the gods. When I went to Rome, I was 19 years old, and if I had heard of the Pantheon, I couldn't remember. All I knew is that my sister Lisa was taking the family to go see this temple or to go see this church. And it just hit me how beautiful this thing is. I was not expecting the size or the beauty. And again, if you look in this picture, you can see people in the shadows there. So that gives you a sense of scale as well. This is an enormous building. And here's one thing that really blew me away about it. Okay, so here's another picture. Here's from the sky. Do you see that huge hole at the top? That's a 30-foot wide hole. And what that does is it creates this spotlight that kind of moves around the room. And the day that I was there was one of those strange days, that it's raining but it's still sunny. So we walk in there, and there's this spotlight just hitting the floor, and it was drizzling water and splashing on the floor and running off into the drains. Now let's take a minute and look at this ceiling. This is more waffle than pancake, right? So the question is, what are all those ridges doing in there? One is it's supposed to add beauty, and it does. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful things in the world. And it would have been decorated before, 2,000 years ago. Another thing is it actually adds strength. If I held a waffle in one hand and I held a pancake in the other, the waffle is stronger, right? So it does add strength. The other thing is they literally poured in this ceiling. It's all concrete. No one had ever built a dome this size before. So if you're building a dome that stretches this amount of distance, you're worried that it's going to cave in. So by having these ridges, you're actually making it lighter. Some of the other things that they did to make the roof lighter is they put hollow cups in there to have these little small air pockets. Another thing is that at its base, the walls in the Pantheon are 20 feet thick. But then it slowly gets skinnier and skinnier and skinnier as we get to the hole there at the top. Again, here's that spotlight that we see. It truly, out of everything that I saw in Europe, or that I've ever seen in Europe, this building by far impressed me the most. It is just an incredible structure, and it's hard to tell from these pictures. And here's what it looks like from the outside again. Now, the other interesting thing about the Pantheon is that the width of it, I might get this wrong, I think it's 120 feet. But the width equals its height. So there's a perfect sphere on the inside. And again, they did this without computers or anything. The other intriguing thing that we can see in this picture is Do you see this? How it looks like it's almost a shadow of the pediment? That pediment was supposed to be at that height. It's a few feet off. And the question is why didn't they build it to the correct height, the original height that it was supposed to be? The answer is who knows? We don't know. It could have been that they didn't have enough marble at the time. It could have been that they wanted to open it at a certain time, and so they're kind of cutting corners a little bit. We don't know. We just know that it was supposed to be at that height, and for some reason it didn't get there. Okay, let's talk about coins a little bit. On the right, this is obviously a penny. On the left, this is a Roman coin. I want you to see the similarities. We modeled our coins after their coins. The difference is, with our money, and I'm talking about bills and change and coins, who do we put on our coins? Well, we put dead presidents, mostly. We put dead people on our coins. There's never been a president that came into office and just starts printing money with his face on it. Okay, Obama, when he became president, he did not change the dollar bill, right, or the quarter. In Rome, once you became Caesar, you started putting your face on those coins, and you would send those throughout the empire. So the question is why? These coins were seen as little teeny newspapers, sending out the message of who the new Caesar was, any important events that were going on. For instance, when the Colosseum was built, on a coin they actually put the Colosseum and sent that out throughout the empire. Now I know what you're thinking. We're talking about coins, and I'm sure you're thinking, coins. Oh, really exciting, Mr. Borup. This is great. And next, guess what we're talking about? Roads. And I'm sure you're thinking, oh, roads, even better. Well, without coins and roads, you have no empire. So these are extremely important things. Coins stabilize the economy. It increases trading. Because if you don't have coins, if you don't have a standard currency or a common coinage, you will never grow. Because without coins, you're going to have to barter. And when I say barter, I mean you're going to take a chicken and you go to the baker and say, I'll give you this chicken for so many loaves of bread. Well, that's a difficult thing to do. Have you ever tried to put a chicken in your pocket? I haven't, but that would be a hard thing to do, right? And so by having this common coinage, you're just increasing trade. People are going to buy more things because it's easier. Think of credit cards today, how easy it is to buy money with credit cards. And that's why in America we spend so much money, because it's so easy to do. And another thing is this helps unify the empire. Right around the year 2000, Europe started using the euros to unify their empire, common currency. Okay, now let's talk about roads. There's a common adage you're saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, Rome built this incredible web of roads. They built so many roads that if you put them end to end, they would go around the world twice. So this is an incredible accomplishment. And yes, they use concrete and they also use paving stones. The other amazing thing about these Roman roads is they're still being used today. Some of them are still being used. Here's a picture of a Roman road built 2,000 years ago. Cars still drive on this. So it's just extremely well built. They were originally built for soldiers, to move soldiers from one end to the other of the empire. But also it's used for trade. And another interesting thing that we'll talk about later is without Roman roads, Christianity wouldn't have spread nearly at the speed that it did. And to go back to that saying, all roads lead to Rome, if you were on a main road, you would actually have mile markers. And on there it would say how many miles you were from Rome. So there is some truth to all roads lead to Rome. Another thing that Augustus does is he ends the civil wars. remember, he fought a civil war. He fought Mark Antony and Cleopatra. But even before him, Caesar fought Pompey. And even before Caesar and Pompey, Sulla fought Marius. So there's this long string of civil wars. And what Augustus did is he brought peace to the empire. Today we call this Pax Romana. P-A-X. Pax means peace. It's nearly the same in Spanish or Portuguese. It's just P-A-Z, paz, or paz. Romana means Roman. So translated, this means Roman peace. And this Roman peace doesn't mean that they weren't fighting people along their borders. It just means that they didn't have civil wars. That inside the Roman Empire is extremely peaceful. And this allowed trade to increase. And when I say trade, I mean goods and ideas. And going back to the Roman roads, without the Roman roads, for the missionaries to travel on, and for the apostles to travel on, Christianity would not have spread nearly at the speed that it did. And without Pax Romana, Christianity would not have spread to the speed that it did. Another thing that roads can do is you can transport grain on there. So this is actually increasing the grain supply into Rome and removing that constant fear of famine. And Augustus starts building up these storehouses of grain just for that case if there was a famine. So we talk about all these building projects. Remember, Augustus famously found Rome a city of wood and left it a city of marble. Well, why was he building so much? Well, one, he could. He had the funds to do it. And two, there was a lot of unemployed in the city, so he wanted to give them jobs. We did the same thing in our country. Here's the Hoover Dam. Well, during the Great Depression, we built lots of dams. During the Great Depression, to give people jobs, President Obama passed a stimulus package, $800 billion. And part of that is to create jobs. And so he says he wants to rebuild or strengthen roads and bridges. Bridges literally fall down at times. In Minnesota, a bridge literally fell down while cars were driving on it. And so he wants to build the infrastructure back up during a depression to give people jobs. And so Obama wasn't the first to do it. We did it in the Great Depression, and Augustus does it 2,000 years earlier.
Lands that were once Roman are today divided among more than 40 nations, from the Atlantic to the Euphrates, from the Sahara to Scotland, more than 2 million square miles. Romans built a stunning network, 53,000 miles of paved roads connecting the empire. Roman roads put end to end would have circled the earth twice. And they were so well built, many survive to this day with the original paving stones. Like the American interstate system, Roman roads made it possible to defend a huge territory. The endless byways also accommodated tax collectors, traders, and messengers as they traveled from exotic Egypt all the way to the hostile Scottish Moors. A fast courier could travel nearly 200 miles in a day. The army could reach anywhere in the empire in a matter of weeks. The march from Rome to Spain was said to take just 27 days. The phenomenon of Roman roads explains much about how Rome spread her influence around the world, and even across the centuries to our own time. From the ruts carved into ancient roads by chariot wheels 2,000 years ago, we get the modern railway gauge for American and European trains. Wherever 3 major roads crossed, News was often posted for travelers. The Latin word for such a crossroads was trivia, or trivia, literally a three-road junction. Roads also carried Roman culture throughout the empire.
We think of the spread of Roman culture akin to the spread of blue jeans and McDonald's. I think we're looking at it very much the right way. Why is it now that we have football being played in Europe? Or just look at the way the NBA is able to export itself. Michael Jordan as Virgil. I think there is a certain amount of connection here. That's the best analogy, I think, for the spread of Greco-Roman culture, and people could resent it in just the same way they resent Americanization now.